What's up, guys? We just watched the season finale of Walking Dead, and we are here to talk about it. With me today is Brandon Hunt, Terry Schwartz, Jim Vavida, and I'm John Borba.
You nailed my name. Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about the season as a whole. So to see who's going to start us off, I think we're going to play this in turn. We're going to start with Eenie, Meenie, Miney, Mo.
Catch
a tiger by the toe. So I think the way that we're going to approach this season is we're going to talk about the successes and failures of how this has worked so far. So for me, the premieres were very strong. I think that the season premiere with the wall coming down and jumping around in time and this black and white to color perspective really brought weight. I mean, that first episode felt like 4 episodes condensed into one, and the way that Walking Dead had been telling stories before felt a little drawn out, which tends to be a little bit of a problem as things go on. But that one was just so tight, and it was its own little story, and they made you care about a character with Ethan Embry, who was shown to you 40 minutes before, and when he dies, it's extremely impactful.
Right.
Whoa.
And to the fact where Andrew Lincoln, went to Scott Gimple and was like, "Are you sure you want to kill this guy? He's so good." And I think that was great, but in turn, the finales for the season really fell flat, and you really lost a lot of the impact that a finale is supposed to leave you with, as you can see by the total blackout at the end of this one.
Right.
But I think those are going to be my 2 biggest problems
The
with
mid-season finale had a similar sort of blackout,
just kind of
sort
fizzled.
fake out
Kind
type
of
thing.
eased you out of it, at least. At
At
least
least
we got that, but we were still on the edge of wondering what was going to happen,
Well,
kind
and
of mirroring this season finale.
And it led up, for comic fans, you at least got to know what was coming next with, Jesse getting her hand chopped off and Carl getting his eye blown out, which is the other premiere that I thought really just was impactful to me. It was probably one of my favorite episodes of the series.
Same.
And unfortunately, the back end just doesn't carry the weight. You have to wait for the payoff, like we're going to have to in season 7. So
this whole season feels a bit front-loaded.
Yeah.
On everything from the premiere to the mid-season premiere, and then it just kind of fizzles out. I feel like after the first 3 or 4 episodes of each half, they kind of fizzle out until we get this like big bump at the end.
Makes you wonder, do you really, is this ultimately like an 8-episode show stretched out over, 13 or whatever?
I will say,
16.
for me, one of the big strengths of this season was introducing big characters from the comics.
Yes.
The Jesus episode,
My favorite.
like that, from the second that Tom Payne came on screen, I was like, you've got me. And same, we waited so long for Negan, a 90-minute episode. He doesn't come until the last 10 minutes of the last episode of a 16-episode season. Right from the start, I would have been so excited if it hadn't had that sort of cop-out moment in the finale. But my biggest issue is the pacing, and I think this goes back to what you guys were just saying, is that I think, sometimes The Walking Dead can have a slow episode that is so impactful, and it makes use of the time so well. And like The Grove is one of those where it was just, completely captured. Clear was another one that was a complete side story, worked so well. Then you have episodes like the one that we had last week, the second to last episode of the season, where a lot of things were happening, but just to happen, just to feel space. And I think this goes back to like, it's almost like they have too much time, and I'm like, really, you need to make use of the time you have. I would like them, it feels like season 7 is going to really stick a lot closer to the books, and now that they have Negan and this new forward momentum, I really would like to see that they sort of can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, there's been a lot of treading water on this show over the seasons, like a sense of, we're still figuring that out. You can almost feel like the writer's room, like, let's just have them walk through the woods one more time.
I wonder if they're almost afraid of if they're afraid of a Game of Thrones situation where they get ahead of the source material.
Right.
Because it seems like this season leaned a lot heavier on the comics.
Well, when we were doing our comparisons, we would notice that for a couple times, it would be like one episode would cover like 4 or 5 issues. And so I feel like sometimes they might, they feel like, oh crap, what did we do? We should have maybe drawn this out or spread this out.
I'd say on the other side, like people who are involved with the show have said that they always remix the comics. This isn't like Game of Thrones in that it is a straight adaptation. It
Right.
is mixing and matching. So I don't think that will necessarily be an issue until they get to the point where they're like, what do we keep doing with Negan?
Right.
It's past it. What about Brandon and Jim? What about your strengths and weaknesses of this
I
season?
think for me the big strength was just seeing Carol's arc throughout, especially starting so stone cold to being legitimately penitent about what she's done. I think it's been some of the more beautiful acting on the show. I think Melissa McBride is just killing it. No pun intended.
Anymore.
She's great. Well, yeah, she's hanging in there.
We'll see.
She's kind of squirming around now, but but I think, the fact that she's been able to keep us guessing, like that whole, a day in the life of Carol. She's made, gets blood, has to go change her outfit, like things like that, so that they were able to find very human moments with her, and even like Rick getting a bit of that too, like the episode where they're just driving around, him and Daryl, and you get to hear what kind of music he likes. It's little humanizing things. I'm just going to keep coming back to the fake out stuff this season. If there are two things I'm going to remember about this season, it's wow, Carol was just so great this season. And two, how many times are you going to cry wolf? And I don't know if you blame the showrunners for this or if this is the network just being like, oh my God, hold on. Can we just stall until we want to know whether or not we kill off this person? And it's just, to me, it's become frustrating as a fan. Like you just, I'm feeling overly manipulated.
Which I will say, I had a chance to talk to Scott Gimple on the phone, who's the showrunner, and he, it was a group call, and a lot of people really took him to task for that, especially at the end of the finale. And what he said, is sort of like a naive sentiment, but he was like, we have a plan. When you see 701, you will know why we shot this the way we did, and I hope that we win back your trust. The cynics can see this as a ratings ploy, but I'm like, listen, it's like the third
It is a
obvious
ratings
time.
ploy.
I know,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm skeptical.
Third obvious
until
time this
proven
season, like
otherwise.
with Glenn and everything. It's like, dude, you can't keep using the same trick over
Yeah.
and over.
And I really hope they learn that lesson.
I hope they've tested the waters with this and they've gotten a big onslaught of fans being like, yo, we see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you calm it down? Like, we're smarter than this.
That shouldn't be the discussion the day after the Negan episode. We should all just be talking about how great Negan is. Instead, that's the second thing out of someone's mouth. The first thing is like, man, what a cop-out.
Well, and especially after it seems like the audience of this show really was anticipating this so much that they went out and sought to educate themselves from source material. I read about a lot of people being like, I picked up the comics to find out what's going to happen with Negan or who this Negan guy is. And it all fell flat. It was all for naught when they get there and they're like, oh man, I can't wait to see this moment that I picked up this comic for or spent so much time like investigating and learning about, and then just being totally washed out.
I almost feel like they could have just ended the season with everyone on their knees and Negan having that great scene and just stopped it and like opened the new season with the death instead of having it strung up over two. I think having our heroes being in this like so vulnerable and so fully defeated, they could have just stopped it there instead of having to have that extra.
Because think about that tension in that scene. It was some of the
we didn't talk. We were all watching it together. And we were just,
and we had been blabbing throughout watching the whole thing, but the minute he came out, we all shut up because you were like, it was. I seriously felt so tense, like the pit in my stomach, and to see Rick brought so low.
Yeah.
The comic, Negan's entrance is to represent that nobody is safe in the comic. So, spoilers, but Glenn gets it in the comic. And that whole issue is all about you're not safe, you're not prepared. To kind of go back onto the show, maybe this episode is not so much the character death that we're all expecting, and believe me, I wanted to see that too. But thinking about it, it could be to represent and to show that Rick is not like the master of his territory anymore. It is a success in showing, oh crap,
The
Rick
massive
is
humbling
the wolf,
that he goes
exactly.
through. Yeah.
The wolf of this whole territory, the king, is no longer that. He is now the prey.
Yeah.
And that works, even though we didn't get to see what we wanted to see, which was the big character death.
I mean,
we'll
just
see if the
to-
dialogue changes around it. But I do. What are your strengths and weaknesses before we move on to predictions?
There were a lot of fantastic, explosive, exciting episodes in this that are really, really strong. And again, they're on the front end of these seasons. The one where they go enter the
Savior
Savior compound,
yeah,
and just
so hard to watch.
obliterate them. And it's very hard to watch.
Feel it. You
So
feel
because
it.
I mean, I think, and that works with the season finale because you're like, wow, these people are cold-blooded,
Yeah.
and they're masters of their craft, which is killing, and then to turn that on a dime.
And I feel like two other really big episodes were the one with Morgan, where you get to see a little bit about
Yes.
where he came from,
Yeah.
and then the one where Maggie and Carol are captured, and it has this
Yes.
slow
So
burn
good.
where you watch Carol
Yes.
play this manipulative psychological game with this other woman who's trying to keep up with the chess game, and then just this explosive ending where they just kill everyone, and you see these characters just laid bare and exactly who they are, and then just barbecuing strangers.
Right.
And Rick walks in and toasts Primo right at the end, and you get this real sense of like, okay, the stakes have been raised. There's going to be consequences, and then you get to this finale, and it just fizzles. I mean,
Well, in between there, here's my weaknesses, is in between there, we get these two so strange episodes that are sort of weirdly directed that kind of, I don't want to say negate, but it feels like they dumb down the rest of the episodes.
They felt like filler episodes. like-
exactly.
especially the second to last episode when you're like, okay, you need to defend Alexandria, but every single one of your warriors is leaving for a stupid reason.
Yeah.
Like, you're all leaving, and it purely was there to get all the pieces in place for what happened in this episode. I don't want to be able to say, like, Scott Gimple always talks about how the viewers and fans of The Walking Dead are very smart people. We are smart. We're too
Don't
smart
play with
for
our
that.
emotions.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, especially to add on to that, I think the Daryl thing at the end of episode 15, shooting him and being like, blood on the screen.
And then
More of a
And then to
cop
do
out
the
than
then the
exact
season finale.
same
voiceover thing, though, too.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to be like, to even undercut the, oh, is he dead thing by saying, you'll be all right. Well, then just work.
Then just don't just
Right.
show that. Yeah.
Being cute about it.
Smack him out. Yeah.
there was no payoff.
Yeah.
That contributed to nothing in the next
Yeah.
Get a
episode.
blanket out of it.
Yeah, I will say, like, I always credit The Walking Dead for being willing to experiment. It's very easy for a show that is as popular as this show
Right.
to rest on its laurels, do the same thing it's always done. It never does that. Every 8 episodes, it tries something different, even if it was just the framing, the black and white, the way it came back at the beginning of season 7. That said, I hope they learn from some experiments
Definitely.
that fail.
I think they got a little too confident in what they were trying to do. And it
So
bit
we
them in
saying
the
that
ass a
they're
little bit.
basically like Rick in the group? Are we making them get down on their knees right
Well, I
now?
guess
Is that
we're
what's
the
happening?
Negan. I guess we should look ahead to season 7,
Get
though.
in the bat.
We all have some big predictions about
Yeah.
what we think is going to come up next year.
Okay, so now is the time for having the conversation about what do all of these successes and failures contribute to? Where do we think that this path leads? Jim and Terry have not read the comics, so they are coming into it completely from the source of the show, which I think is a great perspective.
With a little bit of strategic Wikipedia.
I've read a few of the comics here and there, but not like you guys.
Not like
to
you
that.
guys, yeah.
And Brandon and I have read every issue probably multiple times
Yep.
of the comics. So we're going to be a little bit biased onto what the comics have provided, but I think the biggest question that we all want to talk about right now, because of the last episode and the anticipation of this season, is where does Negan go from here? How is this show made anew by Negan? And Kirkman and Scott Gimple have basically said, this is the end of one story
Yep.
and the beginning of another. And it feels that way in the comics. This
very true.
episode is issue 100 in the comics, and Kirkman and a lot of people know that the 100th issue of a comic is usually a time when people have like, okay, I've read the centennial of this, and the 100th issue of this, like Brandon said, is the one that says, this is why you keep reading. The Negan that we see in the comics from here is extremely impactful. He changes the dynamic of how all of these characters interact, and especially the world that they live in. Because you've just discovered Hilltop. You've just discovered these guys wearing armor with horses that are, spoilers, from a place called Kingdom. And Negan is integrally tied into all of them.
Right.
And I will say, just to quickly build off that, back to the Scott Gimple conversation, he did say, we started to expand the world in this half a season. The world gets even bigger in
Yes.
season 7. So I think it's fair to say that we can assume that we get to Kingdom, based
it's
on what
super
we've seen.
true
But I think that we'll get
in the
that.
comic. Reading the comic from issue 100 up to now is a completely different beast. It's very strange because you are out of that world that you've been sitting in for 100 issues, and it's completely different. It's like going to another continent. So with Negan,
you go from a story that's focused on 5 to 12 characters to a world
20,
and
something like
how
that.
these interact with each other and how they barter.
Right.
So
and
where
stuff
do you
like
think that Negan is going to go in
And
the
I
show?
think that Negan is just going to paint the town red. If the show does what the comics do, we are going to see a lot of people die, some very graphic scenes, real big spoilers. You're going to see people get laundry tools heated up and placed on their face. There's a lot of
Are we ready?
really visceral moments. You learn about how Negan interacts with the people around him and how he leads these people to cause such chaos.
Right.
And the dichotomy, and also how close he comes to Rick in a lot of cases,
Right.
and how their meeting really changes each other. And the biggest thing to know,
he is a new ingredient in the big melting pot. And for, if you can say the worst, right, he's that one thing that changes the entire color of the show.
and
the
in some
series.
ways makes these characters better. They really are forged in
absolutely.
steel and become totally anew.
I would say that my prediction is where we see Carol and Morgan grow, because I think they've become a really interesting yin and yang, where we see two sides of the same coin, the way that the same circumstances mold people.
I think they hook up. They go to hook up.
Okay, are people going to ship these two yet? Or
No, I'm all on board the Daryl and Carol ship still till the end of time. But I think it's really interesting, if these people are from Kingdom, which I think that they are, even though no one will say until next season, how they are influenced by the lifestyle that those people lead. I think that is going to be a big part of their storyline. And hopefully, as it's noted that the Alexandrians are sadly lacking in numbers, especially when there's that harrowing scene where we see just how many saviors there are. We're going to need some allies from Hilltop who've already been established. I think, depending on the Carol and Morgan storyline, maybe some from Kingdom through them.
And I think the really interesting thing about the Carol and Morgan storyline is, for me, a comic book reader, both of these characters are dead in the comics.
Absolutely.
They're
And very
not
different
alive.
than they are in the show.
and they're I mean, Carol kills herself at the prison by just walking into a walker and giving up. And Morgan dies in Alexandria when the walkers break through the wall, which would be about the mid-season point in this season. And the fact that they're still going and they're totally different, and they're these amazing actors that are changing each other. They're really changing their perspective on this world. Is amazing. It's going to be forever interesting to me because I don't know where that path is going to lead.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, the thing that I still ultimately come back to with this show is oftentimes a relationship between two characters, not necessarily amongst the greater group, but the thing that I'm really looking forward to, that I think is going to be hopefully something they don't screw up next season, and we get a taste of it in the last 10 minutes with Negan and Carl, and seeing sort of Carl, who's been worshiping his dad, and the fact that he's like, I think he said to him, like, oh, is that your daddy's hat kind of thing to him?
You're
and,
a little serial
you're a
killer
little
in the
serial
making.
killer. He sees a little bit maybe of himself, and the idea of him getting into this kid's head, and this kid who had been worshiping his dad, whose whole world has been with his father, now seeing his father maybe as a failure, and the sort of the humbling of all this stuff that Rick has been hammering home with people, and how does that affect Carl and Rick's relationship on the show as opposed to the comic? That's what is the thing that'll keep me hopefully invested in season 7. And if they screw that up, I don't know if I'm back for season 8.
You're onto something, though,
Yeah.
because Scott Gimple did. I mean, there's stuff in the comics, I know that, but Scott Gimple did say that Carl Negan relationship will translate.
Maybe
to
this is
season.
the man I need to be, not my dad.
Well, though he did say they're definitely going to do it, though whether it's with Carl or whether another character comes into play. He was like very ambiguous about it. Maybe that's just because he didn't want to give away whether Carl's
Right.
was survived.
And in the comic, Carl is way younger than he is in this. So I think that scene is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series because the way that those two play off of each other is amazing. Carl turns into this like angry chihuahua barking at Negan. And
Well, don't spoil it too much if we're going to have it.
We will say-
Brennan, your prediction before we get to the big question.
Yes, I predict that this arc with Negan is going to be a long and arduous one.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think we're going to go through a rough patch. And season 6, suffice it to say, with all of its failures and everything, I think it's a bridging season to this one, which will be probably one of the best on the show.
You don't think they're gonna kill off Negan at the end of season 7? I hope. I mean, make this guy last a few.
I don't
want to
they are.
spoil anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that this is a character who lasts in the comics.
Yeah, I think so.
I did say that this is a long, long road we're headed down.
Yeah.
So
why
Need
not cast
Morgan
someone-
getting those checks.
Yeah, why not cast someone as amazing as Jeffrey Dean
Exactly.
Morgan? But the Negan of it all, this is the big one.
All right, so the big question that probably everyone's waiting for is who died? I think we're all going to pick someone different here. So I'm going to let Brandon kick it off.
I'm gonna go with my gut, Daryl, because Glenn in the comic is the character that is the most popular, and Daryl in the show is the character that's most popular. And I think that Daryl biting the bullet is gonna cause that riot that everyone wants to see, right? Like, you know, that would suck if he died, honestly. But man,
Yeah.
would that be such a turning point.
Well, Norman
In the
Reedus is
series.
doing those.
He's doing those motorcycle shows now.
Things, so.
He's doing those motorcycle shows now. So I think, definitely think that Daryl is, for the show, is in place of Glenn. I think that he's the one.
And I think for the writer's room, that's the easiest one to do because he's not in the comics.
Right.
So they can...
I feel like there are a couple of them now that aren't in the comics. Or my vote is someone who has died already in the comics at this point in the story, but still alive now. I originally thought it would be Carol, mostly because she would be the person who I just don't want to die. I think there's so much potential. She's not there. She's safe. She's good. So I think Abraham, and I'm like ready for him to die too. I was like, that breakup with Rosita was not okay. Like, get out of here.
Talking about having babies.
I'm
that's
like,
never a
I
good
was
sign.
upset that Denise died. I think it could be Abraham. I think I would go with that. And I love Michael Kudlitz, but like, that breakup scene was not okay.
We're bringing personal feelings.
It's like, it's very personal.
Deep.
At this point, I no longer think the show has as much confidence as
Cojones.
as it likes to think. So that's why I'm thinking, what's his name, Aaron? Right?
Aaron.
Yeah, the most expendable
Spaghetti guy.
one on their knees is that guy, Spaghetti Man, because who's the show will go on if they kill him off. I think we're getting misdirected with all the stuff with Daryl, very purposely so. I think it's another Glenn fake out thing all over again. I think they'll kill some of those big characters off so far, but what do they need him for after this except to get sacrificed?
And what does Daryl still have to
he's a
do on
lamb.
the show? He's sort of, his storylines have petered off. But
He's got to get his crossbow back. That's the first thing.
Yeah, his bike and everything.
Okay, so originally my guess was going to be Daryl, but after some review and some consideration of things that Kirkman has said about issue 100 and things that Scott Gimple has said about the direction of the show, I think that their commitment to creating a new chapter and a new story and really severing this
Ties with
the first
chapter.
6 seasons to the forthcoming seasons, I think the cleanest way to do that is with a katana. I'm gonna say that I think old dreadlocks Michonne is probably gonna bite it.
But what about Risha? They're so happy.
I think
Even
that's
more of a reason.
I think that's a contributing factor. One of the big characters that's still in the comics that is kind of in Michonne's place is Andrea. And the dynamic between Andrea and Rick is not the dynamic between Michonne and Rick. It's completely different. And I think that Danai Gurira is an amazing actress, and she's done a lot of things in her career, and I can very much see this being a point where she says, okay, I'm ready to move on and do something else. I've been doing this since, season 3.
She's also a playwright with shows on Broadway, so she does have some other
She's
coals in the
very
fire.
successful on her own. And I think that I can see her wanting to move on, and the show taking the opportunity that is this and letting her go and really affecting and motivating Rick to just turn into, a steam engine and roll right over Negan with some problems along the way.
Right.
But I think she is going to be a high-cost, high-impact character. I think it's a dangerous prediction to make because she is still very imperative to the story of the comics, and she seems very important. She's the lieutenant and the right-hand lady of Rick. But I think that she is probably the one that's going to have the most impact on the lasting characters like Carl and Rick, who Carl was very accepting of the relationship that she has with his father. So we'll see.
I do think it's interesting that none of us said Glenn, who is the person who gets killed in the comics,
Right.
and I think it's because everyone is expecting Glenn. That's my
Right.
some people are jumping to that assumption, but
But I feel like I almost said the governor. I feel like Negan gave him a bit of a pass when he's saying, okay, you got emotional, you get one of those. I don't see them. I feel like that was kind of a wink of like, it's not going to be who you expect.
I noticed that with him and with Abraham, specifically when Abraham gets up and it's like, I'll be the guy. He's like, nah, because if you're so ready to die, why do
we'll
it?
see.
Yeah.
We'll come around.
Exactly.
You need to
Seven,
suffer
see
a
what
little
happens.
more.
Exactly.
And I
You
don't
know,
think-
you're not scared enough.
I don't
Right.
think Negan makes martyrs. That's the big thing that he
Yeah.
says in the comics too. Is he's not going to kill Rick
So
because he doesn't make
Rosita's
martyrs.
biting it.
But
But I think we want to know what everyone else has to
Yeah.
think about it too.
So please comment and tweet at us at IGN, and feel free to let us know what your opinions are on the subject. And as per usual, thanks for joining me, guys. It was a great
Thank you.
conversation.
Thanks for having us.
And for all things Walking Dead, keep it right here on IGN.